Okay, so we shall kick off to this into this great session on fighting stigma and discrimination to achieve social and legal justice. I'm Carla Treloar. I'm one of the co-chairs of the session today. And would you like to introduce yourself as a co-chair?
Hi, I'm Chris Munoz. I'm your co-chair for today. Welcome, everybody.
So to start, I'm going to make some introductory remarks and give some examples about the ways in which we've been thinking about measuring, tackling stigma in Australia. So to do that, I'm going to share these slides and just talk a little bit around some definitions and concepts behind the notion of stigma. I might just ask the Geneva office if you can mute yourself because we're getting a bit of background noise on this end. So for stigma, we understand stigma is a social process of exclusion of individuals or groups because they possess or are thought to possess an attribute that's devalued by the broader social group. For communicable diseases like viral hepatitis, the origins of stigma are really important to consider around the transmissibility of these infections to other people. These are the things, the concepts, the precepts that drive stigma, particularly in communicable diseases. So transmission to others, negative attitudes around transmission pathways, and perceptions of the controllability of viruses that people have brought things upon themselves. Obviously, we're not endorsing these views, but these are the kinds of understandings in the literature that we need to be able to be on top of to introduce useful stigma reduction strategies. We also know that stigma and stigma reduction is important for everyone involved in, particularly in healthcare. So the outcomes of stigma include impacts on healthcare, testing, treatment and care, each step of the care cascade. Stigma can undermine health outcomes at individual and population levels, quality of life, and social isolation measures. And each of these have costs associated with them, again, for the individual and for the health system. We need to think about different types of stigma between people. That's really important. The attitudes, language, behaviour that people exhibit that find stigmatizing, worried about engaging with again, but also stigma as it exists within policies and structures of organisations, in the law, in media, etc. And the notion that these social messages can become internalised and influence people's self-belief and self-worth, and all of these are mutually reinforcing. So to move on quickly, in Australia, we've had a suite of national strategies for hepatitis for a number of years. And examples on the screen here are from the current hepatitis C strategy, which has the goal of eliminating the negative impact of stigma, discrimination, and legal and human rights issues on people's health. So awesome that it's right at top line of a goal of a national strategy. And the target, this example from Hep C, to reduce by 50% the reported experience of stigma among people living with hepatitis C and the expression of stigma in relation to hepatitis C status. So to measure that, my group of researchers put together a stigma indicator that we've been measuring periodically since 2015 amongst priority groups for a variety of these national strategies in bloodborne virus. So just giving you a quick flash on the screen here, please email me if you'd like our plain language statements of this research. Really happy to share. So we've used this one item. In the last 12 months, have you experienced any stigma or discrimination in relation to your hepatitis C status is in the top, and in relation to your injecting drug use is at the bottom. So we can measure this over time. You can see these two surveys were conducted in 2016 and 2018. We've just finished a 2021 analysis, which will allow us to determine whether we're achieving progress towards that goal of the national strategy. We also measure this express stigma amongst the general public and amongst health workers, very importantly. And here I've just put examples from our hepatitis B work. So as I said, just an opportunity to flash this. So please email me if you'd like more details. And my final slide is within the same survey, but a little bit of a different question, which I think underpins the importance of stigma for everybody. So in this case, we've asked people who inject drugs, how often have you done the following to avoid being treated negatively by health workers? And on each of these measures, more than 70% have indicated that they've done these avoidant behaviours, such as on the top line, delaying accessing healthcare, and on the bottom line, not attending a follow-up appointment. So if we have 70% of people in this sample saying this time after time after time, we know that there are still gaps to attend to in the delivery of health services so that people feel safe and they want to come back and continue their healthcare journey. So thank you very much. That's a quick overview of that. And we're going to move on to the presentations in our session. So first I'm going to introduce Jessica Hicks from the World Hepatitis Alliance in the UK, talking about the Hepatitis B stigma report and Hepatitis C stigma survey findings. So over to you, Jessica. You need to unmute.
Thanks, Carla. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we do have a bit of an echo.
Yes, sorry, just
still on mute.
sorry, there's some technical issues, but I'm going to try. Is there still an echo?
Yeah.
Maybe
Shall
it would
we-
be best if we jump to Caroline and come back while they fix the technical issues here.
Great. Thanks, Jessica, for your flexibility there. So we're going to move straight to Caroline Thomas to talk about the HIV Stigma Index. Over to you, Caroline.
Thanks, Carla. Am I audible?
Yes, great.
Thank you. Let me allow me to share my screen. Okay, is my screen can be viewed?
Yeah, and if you flicked, oh, lost it.
Right, then I'm going to put it on full screen mode.
Great.
Okay, so this is just a little bit of the introduction. So HIV stigma index, and by the end of the discussion of the slides, then maybe we can think about the future consideration for hepatitis. It is good that University of South Wales had somehow started the stigma study on hepatitis, and maybe we can see more from the presentation from World Hepatitis Alliance. So a little bit of the introduction of the stigma index. Stigma index is a continuous and systematic journey of activism to address HIV-related stigma and discrimination. The stigma index actually documents how stigma and discrimination impacts the lives of people living with HIV within a country. So it is also a unique research that empowers people and communities most affected by the HIV epidemic. So with the stigma index, the implementation process is just as important as the actual results. So the process of the planning involving people living with HIV, in the actual implementation of the study, as well as the analysis of the data, and also the presentation, and also how to use it on the advocacy. All the processes involve people living with HIV. Actually, people living with HIV or the organizations led by people living with HIV it's a non-negotiable part of and process of the stigma index study. And then it was first developed in 2008. The stigma index has been implemented in more than 100 countries up until now, with over 100,000 people living with HIV participating in the process. In 2017, it has been revised and pre-tested and formally evaluated for its standardized questionnaire. so prior to 2017, the countries can actually negotiate between the questions depending on the needs of the country. But in 2017, it has been revised and standardized, and in 2018, it has been they agreed to use the Stigma Index 2.0, which is the second version to be rolled out in all countries. So every country who is planning to do the stigma index has to use the same standardized questionnaire. The changes including new questions focusing on specific populations to better understand how different groups of people living with HIV are affected by stigma and discrimination, including key populations. So it now gathers data not only from the experiences of people who are living with HIV, but also people who are marginalized because of their gender identity, age, sexual orientation, or involvement in sex work or drug use. And there are non-negotiables process and parts of the stigma index. The first one is that it must be led by the PLHIV networks or networks that led by people living with HIV, and it has to use the standard methodology, which is the version 2.0. And then, of course, for any quantitative research, it has to have a proper sampling frame, and then it also includes people who are from the key population. Other than that, to ensure the quality assurance, it must comply with the review process from the international partnership for its research protocol and also for the implementation. And of course, the data security and sharing is one of the important parts that has to be considered in the process of the data, because of there's many data that personal data that can be breached. So data security and sharing is one of the most non-negotiable items of the study as well. And also the result of the study is used for dissemination. This is the suggested implementing a structure by GNP, and also it has been agreed that it has to be led by the National PLHIV Network. These are the full implementation phases. So in each of the phase, it has to be led and also involve PLHIV. So we were thinking as we discussed this. Since we don't have similar tools for hepatitis, so probably in the future it could be considered for having a similar stigma studies on hepatitis, and also involvement of people living with hepatitis virus community, maybe B and C, and also it has also to be shared globally, and also the result of the study has to be used for advocacy to address hepatitis-related stigma. So, yeah, thanks, Carla. I hope it's clear.
Thank you. Very clear, Caroline. And Chris has expertly invited people to put comments, questions in the format on the platform. And Caroline, if you have any links or anything that you want to put in there too, so people can go and have a further look at the HIV Stigma Index, and get in touch with you either through the platform tonight or today or later on. It is tonight for me in Sydney. So there you go. Jessica, are you ready to go? You're still on mute. Not yet? We'll come back to you. Okay, so we might move then to Catherine Freeland from the Hep B Foundation in the US to talk about, oh, Jess, you there?
So can you hear me now, Carla?
Yeah.
Okay, I think maybe we're fixed.
Okay, so do you want to share your slides?
Okay, let me share my screen.
So while Jessica's getting that sorted.
Great. Apologies for this. This is I'm joining you from Geneva, from the hub here, and we're dealing with the technology issues of a hybrid event. But thank you all very much. And I think, you know, actually it was great to start off with seeing what's happened in the HIV response and maybe how we can learn from it. So I'm really delighted to be joining you all on behalf of the World Hepatitis Alliance. And just in case anyone doesn't know, the World Hepatitis Alliance is an international umbrella organization with over 300 members in 100 countries. And we work with our members and other partners to really drive action to make the elimination of viral hepatitis a reality. And it's really unfortunate that stigma and discrimination continue to be a barrier to elimination. They stop people speaking out. It really allows for the continued misinformation to circulate within communities. It stops people accessing life-saving treatment. But I think more importantly, it dramatically impacts on the lives of people living with viral hepatitis. So I wanted to share some quotes that people living with viral hepatitis have shared with us around the impact of hepatitis on their lives and what that has meant for them. And, you know, it has meant, you know, an inability to find a job, to a loss of opportunity to study abroad, or even, you know, the loss of a life partner because of the stigma and discrimination. You know, there are unfortunately horrible stories about people that were given deportation orders because of that. And I think that that's a really important point. This final quote around, you know, the government saw me not as a person, but as an expense. And I think that goes to show that just how dehumanized people can be, and just some of the stigma and discrimination that's so inherent in the community. And then another area that's maybe not talked about enough is the sense of self-stigma that people living with viral hepatitis face. And this is a really powerful quote from Danjuma on some of the self-stigma he experienced on being diagnosed. So in the last year, the World Hepatitis Alliance has undertaken 2 projects to better understand and address the stigma and discrimination relating to hepatitis B and hepatitis C. So we undertook a hepatitis C elimination survey in partnership with IAPAC, which is the International Association of Providers of AIDS Care, and Gilead. And the survey aimed to understand current attitudes and knowledge about hepatitis C among the general population, healthcare workers, and 2 key populations: men who have sex with men and people who inject drugs. And we conducted the survey in Italy, Spain, France, Germany, the UK, Canada, and the USA. And we are still actually getting in survey results, specifically for the survey that went to people who inject drugs. But I did want to share some very top-line key takeaways with you. So 74% of healthcare workers strongly agreed that stigma is a barrier to hepatitis C screening. I think this reflects some of what Carla was showing in her introductory remarks. And sadly, it also reflects a survey that we did on stigma and discrimination 5 years ago, which showed more than 50% of people reported unjust barriers to service provision. And it's, you know, quite shocking that we're here 5 years later talking about the same problem with even higher statistics. Amongst MSM, 64% of people would not feel comfortable entering into a relationship with someone living with hepatitis C. And I think this really reflects that there's a lack of literacy, and 53% of respondents said that they lacked information on hepatitis C and how to prevent it. And then in the general population survey, 50% of UK respondents would not feel comfortable receiving medical treatments in a clinical setting that delivers services such as testing and treatment for people living with hepatitis C. And again, this really highlights the discrimination that is fueled by a lack of information and understanding. And so we are in the process of pulling all this data together, and we'll be disseminating later this year. But what it highlighted to us was that we really need a renewed focus and effort on addressing low hepatitis C knowledge and understanding, and really dealing with the deep-rooted stigma in society and also more specifically in healthcare settings. So yesterday, we actually heard two really powerful presentations from Leanne and Jason, who are featured in our Can't Wait, the Impact of Stigma and Discrimination Affecting People with Hepatitis B report. And I really can't do them justice at all. You should, the recording of those presentations is on the platform. But what I did want to do is mention this report and highlight that it really takes stories like theirs in order to drive the change. And it focuses on the work that people are doing to challenge stigma and discrimination, and sets out recommendations in terms of what's needed to support them in this work. So I'll just quickly share some of these, share the recommendations with you. So it recommends that we provide accurate, accessible information regarding hepatitis B for those newly diagnosed, including transmission, health promotion, information, rights and responsibilities, and a long-term health plan. Ensure all newly diagnosed individuals are linked to appropriate care and that there's ongoing monitoring and treatment. Ensure equitable and affordable access to prevention of mother-to-child transmission. Ensure mental and emotional support is provided to people diagnosed and with their families. Require that all healthcare professionals receive ongoing hepatitis education and aware of stigma and how to address it. And I think, you know, that's really important. And then do have just a few others. So ensure testing for hepatitis B is confidential and is conducted for the benefit of the person being tested, not as a condition of employment or education. Ensure anti-discrimination laws are implemented, that there are legal protections in place for people with hepatitis B, and that immigration and visa policies do not limit the freedoms of people living with hepatitis. And I think these were specific to hepatitis B, but a large number of them are also very, very relevant to hepatitis C. So the Alliance will build on this work to date in our future programs. And I know that other presenters are joining us today to share their own novel approaches. And I hope that we can really come together to move the needle on stigma and discrimination to ensure people living with viral hepatitis no longer have to also face this ongoing stigma and discrimination. Thank you.
Right, so good that you got the technical aspects fixed so we could see that. Thank you, Jessica. If you can stop sharing your screen, we can go over to Catherine Friedland from the Hep B Foundation with a video presentation, The Global Impact of Discrimination on People with Hep B. Are we ready to roll the video?
Hello, my name is Catherine Freeland. I'm the Public Health Program Director at the Hepatitis B Foundation, and I'll be discussing the global impact of discrimination on people living with hepatitis B. I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors listed here. I'd like to first define discrimination and what this looks like for people living with hepatitis B. As we know, almost 300 million people live with hepatitis B, and many are stigmatized based on their condition. And recently, over the past several years at the Hepatitis B Foundation, we've heard of people losing jobs, academic or educational opportunities, or having challenges getting visas to work abroad to support their families based on because of discriminatory policies. Much of the literature out there is really focused on hepatitis B stigma. However, there is some literature out there focused on discrimination, mostly coming from China, that specifically call out the negative impacts of discrimination. I think discrimination goes beyond stigma and as a consequence of stigma, and that we should explore this further in research. So we define discrimination by modifying HIV definitions set by the United Nations and defined it as discrimination specific to hepatitis B as unjust, unfair, or prejudicial treatment of a person on the grounds of their hepatitis B status. So in other words, being treated differently from others in the community as a result of one's hepatitis B infection. To work on addressing discrimination in a strategic way, we've started in a different process, first with key informant interviews, followed by collection and documenting through a discrimination registry. followed by anti-discrimination working group, and then policy change as the ultimate goal towards moving forward. We started initially with key informant interviews, really could be considered as a baseline analysis to learn what's happening, and realized that this is a really significant problem in many parts of the world that has a major impact on quality of life. After talking with key informants, we realized that we needed more information and details on where, to whom, how, and why this discrimination is happening. So we initiated a discrimination registry where people could report the experience of discrimination so we can learn about this experience. Additionally, we have convened our first hepatitis B anti-discrimination working group to strategically guide this entire process of documenting and raising the profile of discrimination strategically. We recently hosted our first sessions, and we have worked towards strategizing a way forward. And ultimately, the goal is working towards policy change. And we know that this will take a long time, but we hope with these key players and strategic planning recommendations by people with grassroots experience all over the world, we can really help to do this in a meaningful way. I'd like to now share some of our findings that we've collected so far, starting with our key informant interviews. We interviewed 17 individuals, many living with hepatitis B, and community leaders that work to support others that may have a recent diagnosis, need treatment, or resources in their communities. Several themes were identified, as you can see from the figure here on the right. You can see the individual experience and the structural level experiences of discrimination that are laid out here, really focusing on the structural level experience of discrimination that relate to education, employment, immigration, military, racism, and healthcare services, which can all lead towards psychological responses, mental health, emotional health, and physical health challenges that lead to poor health outcomes, or just outcomes in general, like economic instability, suicide, health outcomes, marginalization, social exclusion, loss of employment, deportation. So you can really see that this has a significant impact on one's quality of life and really can occur in a cyclic nature. Here's an example of some specific quotes that really describe the impact of discrimination. An example of education-based discrimination comes from an individual who shared, "We have a student who I think she was studying as a nurse who was forced to drop out and transfer to another curriculum." Another talks about random testing and as a result being told as a worker in a bank that their services are not needed anymore because they tested positive for hepatitis B. Looking at our registry results so far, it's been live since May of 2021, and we received almost 300 responses. Many of the individuals had experienced personal discrimination. You can see the gender and age distribution here on this slide, many between the age of 30 to 39 and most male. You can see the country of origin distribution. Most commonly, we've heard from the Philippines, followed by Nigeria, India, Pakistan, and the United States. The majority of individuals had experienced discrimination personally, and most by an employer, followed by a health facility or hospital-based discrimination, and travel or immigration-related discrimination. I'd like to take a look at the Philippines, since it was one of the most commonly reported countries that we heard from. The Philippines made up about 30% of our registry responses, and most of the discrimination happened for individuals applying abroad to work or in country and experience discrimination in these specific situations. You can see the countries that individuals were applying to here. And you can see that many were applying internationally to work, which has a significant impact economically for many. I wanted to just acknowledge the Yellow Warrior Society of the Philippines as being a significant advocate for policy change in this area, working towards protecting individuals with hepatitis B. And I'm happy to say that they're involved and supportive of this effort, and we continue to look forward to working with them and using them as a resource and a best practice model for how we can work towards addressing this country by country. Looking at Nigeria, Nigeria made up 12% of our registry as well. and reported significant employment discrimination in country. You can see the positions, seminary, a holding company, and teaching, for example, all really low risk positions that should not be discriminated based on a hepatitis B infection. In conclusion, discrimination is clearly a significant burden on people living with hepatitis B and has a major impact on quality of life. Our next steps are to work to continue to share this information widely, work towards raising the profile and awareness of hepatitis B discrimination, and strategically plan efforts and partnerships with others on the front line so this doesn't have to impact so many people around the world. I'd like to thank you so much for your attention, and if you're interested in getting involved, please don't hesitate to reach out with.
Great, thank you, Catherine. And remember to put your questions in or comments in the chat function, and we can come to them in our Q&A section. So we're going to move straight on to Dee Li from the Inno Community Development Organization in China to talk about stigma discrimination affecting the elimination of Hep B findings in 5 Asian countries. Over to you, Dee.
Thank you. I'm glad to be invited back home, even though I'm thousands of miles away. I missed the birthday party. Sure, you guys can share more with us on the particular detail on how people are celebrating the 50 years of the alliance. I'm a part of the family. I'm really enjoying coming back to talk about the same issue over and over again for the last let me think, for the last 8 years. But it's all worth it because we can still seeing progress being made, but unfortunately I don't think that is the pace, that's the progress that the hepatitis B and C patients are looking forward to. So today I'm going to share the one of the things that we've been doing in the last 3 months, and probably will be going to do for the next 6 months also, at least 6 months also. So how stigma and discrimination are affecting the elimination of HBV. There's the findings in 5 Asian countries. A small introduction. I'm going to spend too much time on how we found it and anything else. But one of the things that we need to address is that we set up the hotline. We set up the grievance mechanism in the workplace so that we could really into the community and understand the need and the emergency of the workers, so that when the workers wanted to say something to us, to say, hey, I was just sad because I'm a hepatitis B patient. I was scrutinized in one specific table with a stick on, with a sticky note saying that is Hep B table, to eat alone with the other hepatitis B patients and workers at the same time. So that's some of the things that we got from the hotline. We will go to the international brands and the factory owner to say, hey, you're doing something wrong and unlawful. I need you to change something, otherwise big things will happen to your workplace and to your company. So we work together with the workers as the people living with hepatitis B, mainly to change the policy inside the workplace. One by one, we help 200 factories to eliminate the job screening, to get into the workplace. So affecting approximately 2 million people in China alone. Now we have the headquarters in Guangzhou. We have the offices in India, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Indonesia, and Malaysia, mainly in India and ASEAN countries. Why stigma and discrimination in the hepatitis sector matter? We go around nowadays in the academia field. We can't still find too many journals and professional writings on discrimination, stigma and discrimination. As the speakers before also mentioned that the stigma maybe is largely discussed, but discrimination is still in a very low context for people to discuss and put on a table to address. But dating back into like approximately 7.5 years ago, in 2015, Also, there's another, let me say another seminar, hosted by the, the Alliance, the CFHAP, led by, it's a team that I'm very proud of to join as well as one of the member in CFHAP, led by, Jenny, Jack Wallace, and also Vicky. So they make something, back into like 7.5 years ago already, to talk about, how and why stigma and discrimination in the health sector really matters. So we can see, 6 different things that we need to take a really look into how stigma and discrimination are one of the biggest area on our pathway to no HAP. So one of the things that maybe you would understand is the psychological burden for diagnosis. If I am a person living with hepatitis, the last thing I want to do is go to the hospital. Otherwise, that is also linked to the second thing, the lack of confidentiality in many scenarios. The doctor, the hospital will steal your record to sell to the workplace to say these people are not are dangerous to your workplace in terms of they will spread out the transmission of hepatitis B to other workers in the same place. So also, because there is no treatment for hepatitis B, the people living with hepatitis will be in so many fake drugs because I dare not to go to the hospital to consult with the doctor. So I'll do a lot of fake, traditional Chinese medicine to help my status to get improved. Also, lack of social support and monitor and care, that is really leading cause to the eradication of hepatitis B. Also, barrier to accessing the treatment and familial context of infection. We got so many cases jumping into our hotline to say, I'm a mother with hepatitis B. I wanted to give abortion to my child because my husband claimed that my baby would be hepatitis B born. So the tragedies are still happening, on a daily basis in Asian countries and in China as well. Why the research? When we take a look into the global health, the global health sector strategies on HIV, STI, and hepatitis for the period of 2022 to 2030, that we couldn't find any specific definition on discrimination and stigma. They're pulling everything together, but these discrimination among these 3 diseases are not completely, but it's largely different. I'm so glad that Catherine, as a speaker before, mentioned literally to nail down the definition of the discrimination against hepatitis B. Also,
1 minute left.
1 minute left. Okay, so
yeah.
Why the research? Most of the good articles are that we can find in the market, they are qualitative. We need something that is quantitative. Also, when we take a look at the big names, the Hepatitis Fund and the Task Force website, there's no mentioning about the hepatitis B stigma discrimination. We need it to be like a quantitative, dynamic, in virtuous circle. So this is the research methodology. I'm going to skip this part, but mainly I want to talk about these, the report. Still, 62.5% of the people living with hepatitis, viral hepatitis, are still experience being sacked because he or she is a PLWH. Last but not least, I wanted to share with you this campaign platform that we're going to do for the next month. We have a SAS platform when we got the case from the PLWH, and then we'll send the case to the local working groups to dig deep down inside to the cases. Also, when we got the case, we have the live index of the SD and D, and then we could do something like what Caroline just mentioned about the index. But it's a dynamic, it's a live and present index. So we will send up to different channels to make sure that more people with hepatitis would come to us to ask for help. So we have this virtuous circle. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dee. And if you've got things to put in the chat that people can go and look in more detail, please do that. We'll move on and introduce Professor Hee-Sun Jun from Thomas Jefferson University in the US. Really interesting paper about stigma associated with diagnosis of Hep B and depression among patients with chronic Hep B. Over to you. And we're going to have a video. Great.
My name is Hee-Sun Jun. I'm the professor at the Thomas Jefferson University. The title of my talk is Stigma Associated with Hepatitis B Diagnosis and Depression Among Patients with Chronic Hepatitis B. So if we look at the background, in the USA, liver cancer incidence rate were higher than those of non-Hispanic white in all Asian subgroups. Liver cancer ranked among the 5 most common sites for Korean Americans. There is an increasing trend of liver cancer for Korean Americans. Annual percent change is about 2.1%. Hep B infection is most likely cause for the heavy burdens of liver cancer among Korean Americans. So these are from the literature, HBV-related stigma among CHP patients. Hep B-related stigma has a detrimental impact on health outcome of people living with Hep B. There are some kind of consequences of stigma. For example, admission to school or loss of employment, impediment to marriage, having children, barrier to accessing health services. There are other 2 factors associated with the stigma. Knowledge about Hep B transmission and the level of education. Those who had a higher knowledge of Hep B transmission and higher educated, they have lower stigma. So far, few studies focusing on psychological distress as a result of this stigma. The purpose of this study is to examine the relation of Hep B-related stigma and depression in Korean CHP patients. This is a part of an ongoing study funded by NIH and IDDK. We will recruit and enroll 550 Korean American CHP patients from 2 study sites. One site is Liver Disease Prevention Center at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital, and the other is Asian Pacific Liver Center in Los Angeles. So far, we recruited 291 Korean CHP patients, and they participated in our enrolled survey. For this presentation, I'm using this 291 sample. So outcome, I use depression measured by PHQ-9. It has from alpha 0.87. So we made 3 categories, minimal, mild, and moderate. As major independent variable, I'm using stigma as a part of hepatitis B quality of life developed by Spiegel. So based on the distribution, we make 3 categories of stigma: low, medium, high. So these are the examples for the questions on stigma. I feel shame, I feel stigmatized, I am overly self-conscious, might be embarrassed, and I could be socially isolated. Someone might find out about my Hep B. So these are the 6 questions. And then for the controlling variable, we're using age, gender, education, marital status, employment, family history of Hep B diagnosis. We did descriptive analysis and ANOVA test and logistic regression analysis. If we look at the distribution of outcome, depression, about 2/3, they reported they had minimal depression, and another 1/3, they had mild to moderate depression. If you look at the background characteristic for this 291 subsample, mean age was 60, age range was really wide, 24 to 84, 50% were men, 80% were married, more than half, about 56%, they had college education, higher than college education. So this sample is kind of highly educated population. 2/3 they are employed. Year of CHP diagnosis was the mean was 27 years with a wide range, 5 to 52 years. About half of the sample, they had a family history of HEP infection. So I look at the mean of stigma by 3 level of depression. So moderate depression, moderately depressed people has the highest level of stigma, followed by mild depression. So this is statistically significant. So when we conduct logistic regression analysis, I made depression binary, minimal versus mild to moderate. For the stigma, I have 3 levels of stigma, low, medium, high. So here the right column, you will see some multivariable logistic regression analysis adjusting our 6 covariate. So those who had the medium or high stigma, they had a higher level of depression, about 3.36 times. So conclusion, about 1/3 report to have mild to moderate depression. HBV related stigma is associated with depression. So we need further study to develop some intervention program to elevate the experience of being stigmatized, including social exclusion and discrimination. So this study is, we have a multidisciplinary study team from Thomas Jefferson University, Drexel, Asian Pacific River Center, Johns Hopkins, and we have a consultant. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And on to our last speaker, a reminder to keep the discussion and questions going in the chat. We'll get to that. So we're going to hand over to, sorry, I just couldn't see you on the screen there for a moment, Maniksha. It's over to you, Maniksha Tomar from the Institute of Liver and Biliary Sciences, India, mixed method study about social challenges experienced by hepatitis B patients. Over to you. I think we've just lost Maniksha from the screen.
Yeah, we lost her. Maybe we can start her record if you want.
Okay, so I'm now going to, oh, we've got a video to play. So let's get that up and running, I think.
Respected dignitaries, I, Meenakshi Tomar, MSc student, would like to present my study entitled Social Challenges Experienced by Hepatitis B Patient. It is a mixed method study. As I start, I would like to thank my guide, Ms. Tarika Sharma, and my clinical guide, Dr. Manya Prasad. So I will start with the introduction of the study. The social challenges of the patient with the hepatitis B with the social stigma and discrimination reported as the most notable challenges. Global evidence indicates that living with hepatitis B is associated with social and psychological applications such as stigma, discrimination, anxiety, depression, and the low quality life. Objective of the study, as the study included 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2, in which phase 1 represent quantitative approach and phase 2 represent qualitative approach. For the quantitative approach, the primary objective was to assess the social challenges experienced by hepatitis B patients seeking treatment at ILBS New Delhi. And the secondary objectives were to find the association of social challenges experienced by hepatitis B patient with their selected socio-demographic variables. And the second objective was to find the association of social challenges experienced by hepatitis B patient with their selected clinical variable. The objective for the qualitative approach was to explore and understand the social challenges experienced by patient with the hepatitis B seeking treatment at ILBS New Delhi. Sampling criteria. In inclusion criteria, hepatitis B patients who were diagnosed to have hepatitis B for at least 3 months seeking treatment at ILBS, who were having age group between 18 to 17 years and conscious oriented to person, place and time, able to understand Hindi or English and willing to participate. And for the exclusion criteria, patient with hepatitis B who were hemodynamically unstable, who were having another type of hepatitis such as hepatitis C and HIV and suffering with mental illness. Methodology, the research approach was mixed method approach. For the research design, in the quantitative approach, it was descriptive research design, and for qualitative, it was case study research design. Setting was same for the same approaches. It was OPD and ward, ILBS New Delhi, and the population was also same. It was hepatitis B patient. The sampling technique for the quantitative approach was convenient sampling technique, and for the qualitative approach, it was purposive sampling technique. And the sample size for the quantitative approach, it was 180. It was calculated by Fisher's formula, and it was 9 for the qualitative approach who were having high social challenges. And the data analysis method was descriptive analysis for the quantitative, and the thematic analysis was for the qualitative approach, and it was based on the Colesi method. Data collection tool, there were 3 tools were used in the study, and first one was subjective data set, which mainly included the social demographic and the clinical profile, and the second was modified hepatitis B stigma assessment scale, and the third was interview guide. The ethical consideration permission was obtained from the scientific review committee and College of Nursing Ethics Committee, ILBS New Delhi. Method of data collection. In the method of data collection, quantitative, after the quantitative approach, those who experience minimal, low and the moderate social challenges and scored 33 to 108 were further go for the data was collected from those patients and entered into the Excel sheet, and analysis was done, and the patient who were experienced high social challenges and scored between 108 and 132 were included for the qualitative approach. And for the result have been organized as per the baseline characteristic and the objective of the study. For in the domain of age, more than 1/3 of the hepatitis B patient, that is 43.3%, were in the age group of 36 to 50 years, and the majority of the hepatitis B patient, that is 80%, were male, and 1/3 of the hepatitis B patient, that is 31.7%, were having intermediate certificate. And the monthly income, for the monthly income, less than half of the hepatitis B patient, 45%, had monthly income less than 20,000 per month. And for the table number 2, that is frequency and percentage distribution of the clinical variable of hepatitis B patient in the since when diagnosed with the hepatitis B patient, less than half of the hepatitis B patient, that is 41.1%, had hepatitis since 4 to 6 years, whereas 32.9% of the hepatitis B patient had hepatitis B since 1 to 3 years. And for history of hospitalization in past 1 year, most of the hepatitis B patient, that is 82.2%, had no history of hospitalization in past 1 year. And this is table number 3, frequency and percentage distribution of hepatitis B patient in term of level of stigma and overall stigma experience. 0.6% of the patient were experienced minimal stigma, and 5.1% experience high stigma. And the mean for the overall stigma was 74.34 with the standard deviation 10.13. For the minimum value, that is 55, and the maximum 114. And this is the pie chart presentation of the level of stigma experienced by the hepatitis B patient. This is the table number 5. It shows the association in which the patient who had monthly income less than 20% experienced more social challenges. And for the clinical variables, patient who had history of hospitalization in past 1 year experienced more social challenges in their life. And this is the result for the phase 2, in which included 9 patients in their social demographic characteristics. And this is the section 2, which included the case description of the patient. This is the section 3, which included the thematic analysis. It includes the three things. One is the getting diagnosed with hepatitis B, social issues, and the third one is stigmatization in the healthcare setting. These all are the verbatims for the themes which included in the study. This is the discussion part. This is the conclusion. Patient with the hepatitis B experience social challenges in aspect of lack of awareness and understanding about disease condition, lack of support from friends and family, and negative attitude of the healthcare providers. These all are the strengths in which mixed method research design is the strength, and the use of standardized tools were included in the study. And the limitation was it is a single centric study that is done on the small sample size. These all are the references. Thank you.
Okay, we got 4 minutes left, so I'll throw in the question, Caroline. The question is it quantitative or qualitative model that the index is built on, and who validated the survey?
Okay, the original one is the quantitative. It's modeled on a quantitative, but the international partnership had guidelines for the qualitative. So for the qualitative, it depends on the country base to develop their own sets of questions. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for that. Catherine, can you answer this question? How did you acknowledge the impact by the cultural belief which shaped the individual and society's perception when you analyze your data covering a very large geographical area with a different history and culture?
Thank you so much. This is a really great question and an important point. Discrimination does look a bit different based on where people are located. And we tried to make sure, and we're still trying to make sure actively, that we're having representation across the globe, particularly where we know there are specific hotspots for discrimination. I will say one overall finding that we have found across the board is a lot of the discrimination and stigma has a lot to do with the lack of knowledge at the community level. So really thinking about how we can work towards expanding that, and sensitization for communities is really important. And also we need policy change, obviously at country level, and protections in place for people living with hepatitis B, and ways of reporting this discrimination and making sure that the discrimination can be addressed at the local level if people are experiencing that. So those protections for people living with hepatitis B is going to be also really important there.
Okay, I guess we have last one question for Dee. What's your one advice to people living with viral hepatitis that can overcome their self-stigma?
I also answer pretty much the same question to the in the discussion forum. The only thing, the only suggestion I can give to the community is that there can be only more and more people like me, without feeling, fatigue or bored to talk about this issue over and over again over the years. There's always a misconception, or maybe let's say a myth in the sector, or maybe the people outside the sector as well, to say discrimination won't exist if you don't talk about it. Take a look at the hepatitis B scenario now. If we don't talk about hepatitis B, because of discrimination and stigma, that relates to what it is now. Only 10% of the population are diagnosed with hepatitis B, meaning that there are at least 90% of the people living with hepatitis are still there because they're too afraid, or maybe they just don't, realize and they're not aware the importance to get diagnosis. So you make a choice. You either become someone to speak out, make people to come out to speak out, or maybe just hide them, forever. With the hepatitis disease.
Thank you, Dee. Well said. So I guess we have 47 seconds left. So let me give the closing remarks. So thank you for attending this session. And this is the reason why we are pushing for policies that would protect us from getting discriminated and encourage people living with viral hepatitis, organizations, institutions, and advocates to keep the discussion going on until such time we will be understood and fully accepted. Thank you for joining this session.